Hello everyone and welcome back to another art history lecture. I am very excited to introduce the topic of today's video, as I have definitely had the most incredibly busiest of weeks in summer, but recently, the first week of July, I actually did just return from Washington, D.C. because I was given the wonderful chance and opportunity to work on site at the Smithsonian Annual Folklife Festival. So this is something that the Smithsonian Institution has been annually putting on since 1967, and the theme changes every year, but this year it was centered on Indigenous voices of the Americas. I have to keep this intro short because there is just so much I want to get into in this video, but the length of a YouTube video cannot express my wonder and gratitude for being able to meet such wonderful professors, students, academics, artists, musicians, athletes, and food waste professionals. I just learned so much in that short span of a week just from meeting these people. I have never really experienced something that ever felt as gratifyingly confirming towards my studies and my passions and my aspirations as a young professional student. But before we do get into the video, I did want to show you the tea that I was drinking, and I was also really excited to show you guys this set that I got. This is so cute, and like it goes on top of each other. But today I am drinking a loose leaf hojicha tea, which is basically like a burnt green tea that's like a little bit less on caffeine, so it's easier to drink later on in the day, and is a very wonderful nutty flavor that I would definitely recommend. Anyways, I met so many incredible people, but one of the main participants that I wanted to focus on for this video was Imilla Skate group. And this event and participant stand was arguably the most popular throughout the entire week course of the festival. And who they are an all-woman skateboarding group from Cochabamba, Bolivia. They have already kind of amassed a digital presence and following, very arguably so, because they are so visually incredible to watch. But this all-woman skate crew always skates publicly, professionally in their traditional poleros, which is what their grandmothers would have worn, and these are these really beautiful, colorful layered skirts typically worn by indigenous Aymara and Quechua groups. This event brought out people from all over the country, the DC skate community, and even the ambassador of Bolivia. I was really grateful to be able to firsthand talk to them and see their art demonstration in person, which was so beautiful to watch, and it really inspired me to make this video essay, which brings me to the theme of it, which is something that is always kind of heavily hand in hand and parallel with skate culture, which is graffiti art. Graffiti art is still such an umbrella term to describe such an incredible range of unsanctioned text written on the walls of urban space, but I feel like I'm gonna attempt to define it to the best of my abilities and my own understanding of it. I interpret graffiti as a very significant method of contestation and radicality, and essentially holds this very unique ability to scream from the walls, "I'm here and I want you to know." The presence of the term itself, graffiti, and street art in technicality has just emerged within the past 50 years or so, but I mean, in technicality, the method of painting or creative visual art on the wall has existed since like primordial times. But I would say in the United States, at least, well-documented origins of street art originally come from Philadelphia and New York City in the 1960s. Quick backstory of New York at the time, and very applicable to the current book that I'm reading, which is The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, which was actually written in the 1960s, and such an incredible book. I highly recommend. So Robert Moses was the main guy in charge of the New York City urban planning life at the time, and he had this awesome plan of trying to get rid of all the public transit for some reason. Like, he just really hated it and wanted everyone to start using cars. So basically, he invested a shit ton of money into building the iconic bridges that we know now of New York City, which are the Verrazano Narrows and the Triborough Bridges, that have obviously become like a super cool landmark of New York, and it's like recognized as it now. But at the time, it took up a lot of fucking money. And also, since now that there were bridges connecting all of the greater New York area, including Brooklyn and Staten Island and New Jersey and Long Island, a lot of people were like, hey, like, maybe I don't want to pay this New York rent, and like, maybe I want to live over there and drive to work instead. And a lot of the wealthier people who could afford to do so in Manhattan actually did choose to do that, and they moved to those areas, which essentially, unfortunately, totally completely hollowed out New York's tax base. And the only people left to pay the taxes to pay off building those bridges were the working class. During this kind of collapsing decade, city services really started to suffer as budget cut followed budget cut, and the population of Manhattan was basically like plunging. By the 70s, there were basically like no public funds left, nevertheless, to fight graffiti street art. And the artist won, as New York was plunged into colorful street art, but also going through very difficult, hard financial times. And still now, I feel like there is like a lot of existing controversy about whether graffiti art is really art, because like you don't really need total technical artisan skill to tag your name. However, personally, I am a very firm believer that art ceases to be art without freedom of expression, and graffiti definitely exercises this right as a medium more than any other medium in the artisan sphere. A lot of the original graffiti artists were people from the African American and Latino urban youth groups at the time, and there's the infamous story of one of the first ever New York City prominent taggers, and it was just a really young individual who made their tag name Cornbread because he just apparently really loved his grandmother's cornbread. And I think this questioning of the validity of graffiti art is also something that circles back to something a lot more broader and more important that should be questioned. Okay, who is saying what is art and who isn't? Like, even when recognized as nonprofits, unconsciously all museums and elite art galleries and elite art auction companies today operate in a way that kind of produces and maintains hierarchy. And essentially by archiving and cataloging and reorganizing the art space on their own terms, where they become the own primary judge in where to draw the line between museum artwork quality and non-museum artwork quality. David Graeber really touches on this really well in this incredible eFlux article that I read by him, and also Graeber is one of my favorite authors, so maybe I'm just biased. Just the sole fact that in elite galleries and high-standing museums that these objects are constantly surrounded by armed security and high-tech surveillance really simply serves to undermine how art, something that is an unalienable right to all humankind, everyone should have access to it, has become commodified under the capitalist sphere. And at this point, the art world, especially the art auction world, has become kind of this existing apparatus for pricing the production of objects, performances, or ideas that might someday merit being sacralized based on the artificial creation of scarcity of the art, when that shouldn't be happening at all, because art should be for everybody. What's so incredibly important about graffiti art is that it allows all creatives to take their art to the streets and essentially embodies that artists don't need to worry about gallery curators or professional critics or potential buyers of their art, and can therefore be completely unrestrained with what they want to direct their creativity towards. A really important distinction that I want to make about graffiti art in this video is that at this contemporary point of the art world is that I really want to distinguish the development of commercialized graffiti, which has transformed graffiti art into mainstream popular and high art commodities, such as the unique loification of Basquiat and the urban outfitterification of Keith Haring's work. It's just, I'm sorry, this is just a tangent.
But it is so insane to me how art museums have the audacity to put on Keith Haring exhibits and basically like rip pieces of the wall from the city that he used to paint on as like a part of the exhibit. Like the whole point is to have the wall stay there because it's not supposed to be meant to be privatized. Like I think it was last summer, a museum in LA, I think it was the Hammer. I totally might be wrong, but like the Hammer did an exhibit on Keith Haring and they were charging people $16 to look at the art when the whole point of Haring making art was that art should be accessible for everyone through graffiti. And it was just like, and this new coinage of linguistic terms of like being Banksied.
I really want to make the distinction between that and the topic of this video, which is the continuing phenomenon of politicized and subversive graffiti writing that is still unlawfully invading cityscapes, and very rightfully so. Graffiti art contains very strong ideological messages encompassing humor, critique, commentary, irony, subversion, but mainly what I want to focus on is its very radical way of explicating one's assertion of existence. And side note, I also find this really interesting, I guess, because I have also spent the summer working at the development department of a nonprofit arts center. And yes, the government helps, but I would say the way nonprofits work and the way the government set it up is they want the majority of it to be coming from individuals donating, which is why philanthropy culture is such a big thing, and they get such great tax benefits from donating a lot of fucking money if they have it. But at the end of the day, like, people just want their name everywhere, no matter how much money you have, you know, whether you pay for it to have it be on the name of a gallery or like an auditorium space or a bench, or if you don't have the money for it, you just want your name on a wall. Like, you just want to assert your own existence as a human. It's totally normal. It's who we all are. Beyond the US, while taggers were spreading their name all across the East Coast, there was another similarly very colorful movement happening outside the Western Sphere in Cochabamba, Bolivia. It's a very known city where art can really have a real influence in politics because people believe in real action, and that can really be witnessed firsthand all over the city, where like every spare bit of wall, building, or lamppost has been decorated with artist tags advertising very radical and political messages. The exact origins of this urban art explosion in Bolivia is still somewhat a little bit unknown, but I do know that they were not actually recognized by the Western Hemisphere at all until a foreign tourist actually created this publicized archive of all the photography of the street and urban art that they took. But still, at the beginnings of recognizing within its own cityscape is still like kind of unidentifiable. Bolivia is noteworthy in South America as a country with a very high majority indigenous population, and it's also very important to regard that historically its Euro-descended population has controlled much of the conventional structures of political and state power that has caused a huge stratification, even now, between wealth and poverty. Going back to the assertion of self-existence, a lot of the street art in Bolivia can kind of be seen as this textual narrative of the artists' selves, and this is particularly evident in one of its numerous public plazas where the bodies of predominantly women and children have been stenciled in life-sized portraits on the square's columns. And not only are these stencils of women and children subjects very normatively excluded from the public sphere in the Euro-modern division of public and private space, they're also largely portraits of indigenous women and children recognizable by their attire and bundles. I think Imilla Skate Group really truly embodies this mission of asserting themselves within the spaces that they are usually excluded from. Like, it was founded in 2019 by crew members mostly in their 20s, and they would meet regularly to practice and make it really especially important to wear the traditional dress of the Polaris. Imilla actually translates to young girl in Aymara and Quechua language, and wearing this traditional indigenous wear that their mothers and their grandmothers wore in these male-dominated spaces of skate parks and skate culture was them wanting to pay homage to their heritage and call it the persecution that the Aymara and Quechua people, majority ethnic groups in Bolivia, have very long faced. Even if I was unable to communicate with them directly, as I unfortunately do not speak fluent Spanish, simply watching them skate and paint was such an incredible and original, unreplicable experience that really helped me to understand them beyond the means of mere lingual communication. I will never be able to experience it again, but I was able to interview one of them with the help of an associate translator. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I apologize if the audio or visual quality or translation is not the greatest nor accurate. It was very quite impromptu. I'm still hoping this interview is kind of able to provide some contextual understanding and further appreciation of Imilla Skate Group and their art, but I was able to interview Juara Medina Montano and got a chance to ask her how the culture of skating and street art is a way of vocalizing political dissent and reclamation of identity, specifically as who she identifies, a female Cholita skater. For me, graffiti has always been about rebellion because it was hard growing up in the street where I'm from, and ever since I was little, I have been painting. And even before I started skating, I think graffiti has always been a part of me. A lot of my older friends growing up were graffiti artists, and they would always take me out to go to like abandoned houses under bridges and do graffiti, even if we didn't exactly have permission. It's kind of, rather than a start for me, graffiti has kind of always naturally evolved for me, with me, especially since it's always been a part of my surrounding environment. For me, urban art is just so important because it's a form of self-expression. It's a form of rebellion, and it's a form of even like the kind of news that you get in your neighborhood, because if something's going on, whether it be political or local or some kind of crisis, you can see it in the paintings on the walls. Painting for me is also a form of catharsis and release of emotions that I felt regarding my identity, my family, and who I am as a Bolivian woman. The outfits that we wear date back to when the Spaniards came and colonized Bolivia, and it was a way for indigenous women to identify their own people and differentiate those who were Spanish and cast them into this rudimentary middle class. So my maternal ancestors had to live on the outskirts of town while the Spaniards lived on the inside. But we, Imilla Skate, choose to remain to dress like this because it's a part of our tradition. It's also part of our origins and identity, and we never ever want to lose that. For a long time, wearing this outfit signified our ancestors who were from farms, or from the mountains, or people from more impoverished areas, but now it's taken on a complete new meaning that we have redefined. And now, as Bolivian women, now that we're able to work and exist in these different spaces, like working in banks, or becoming teachers, or skateboarding, we're all over society now, but we as Imilla Skate choose to remain wearing this because it's a part of our identity, and this is our origin story. I feel like you can really see in Imilla Skate Group's art demonstration and the street art focusing on indigenous women and children across Cochabamba, Bolivia, even if their pleas are denied and they remain invisible in official narratives and city planning, their painted bodies in murals will remain and will display their resolute presence. Street art such as Imilla Skates produces continuous linkages and activities of local spaces of pure connection for these groups of previously silenced identities. Even though the street art is so incredibly publicized now in Bolivia, some of these radical artists will still be continuing to face persistent threats of destruction and cooptation and commodification because of their art and who they are. However, if there is one thing I've learned through this research process and talking to these very incredible, wonderful women, is that as long as there are walls and corners in the urban space to be painted, graffiti has the potential to open up so many new possibilities and move in very unpredictably nomadic lines to reroute and remap the city to what the people would like it to be and what they want to see it to be in the future. Although this YouTube video is not interfacing any public institutional infrastructure illegally, in my own way and in my own form of rebellion, I hope this video can exist online and in the digital sphere as this indestructible temple of reminder as the same way graffiti does in my own way, of the presence of these voices of Imilla Skate group, of the artists of Bolivia, of the indigenous majority groups of Bolivia, and the silenced identities that use graffiti art as a form of radicalizing their assertion of existence and their identity and who they are. Like I said, I honestly really wish I could make a video essay and could have been able to interview every single artist and musician and participant that I met at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, because they all had these such incredible, wonderful narratives and stories to share. But a lot of them actually are uploaded on the Smithsonian Folklife YouTube channel, of the interviews and events and talks that other artists did, if you are interested in the subject, that I will link in this video. But I really did want to work on this video and upload it as also a form of gratuity for being able to interface with such incredible and wonderful people, especially the Imilla Skate group. But like I say at the end of every video, I hope this video taught you something. I hope you learned something from it. I hope it inspired you in some sort of way, like it inspired me to make. Not just specifically this one, but all of the videos that I've made have definitely very significantly inspired me in some sort of way. I do hope you took something away from this, and I definitely will be working on my next video very soon. And thank you for being patient with me during this busy summer, and I can't wait to see you in my next art history lecture. Bye! Thank you for watching!